Hi everyone, it's Kirsty here on the Great Awakening Generator show, which is belonging to Rose McNair. And here we have the Neurodiversity Controversy segment, where we just chat about all types of perspectives on neurodiversity, what it is, what it's like to experience it, whether it's even a real thing. And we just welcome all points of view and conversation. And tonight I'm here with Sandy McGivern-Butler, who is my dear friend. She's a fellow homeschooling mum. Like myself, she's self-identified as ADHD based on her experience in the world and the research that she's done. And like many of us, ADHD is a woman of many and varied interests and talents, including a passion for crafting and upcycling. So welcome, Sandy. Thanks for being here.
Hi.
Welcome, welcome. um, and so, yeah, Sandy and I have known each other for a while, and we've had quite a few conversations about things ADHD. And one thing that um, has always struck me about Sandy is how passionate she is about things. She's like, she'll flip from project to project, but it's like, yeah, whatever she's enthused about, like, I'm like, wow, even if it's something I'm really not into, I'm like, yeah, it does sound exciting when you put it like that. Um, but, once I kind of recognized the ADHD traits in myself, I was like, "Ooh."
I'm one of the more obvious friends of yours.
Probably, but I have many, which is an interesting thing where you kind of uh, find your people. Yeah, yeah. And so there's so many things we could talk about, but what I thought it would be fun. I don't know if fun's the right word, but I find things like this fun to talk about RSD, which is an acronym for Rejection Sensitivity Dysphoria. And that's not an official diagnosis in the DSM, but it is an experience that anyone can have, but it seems like it's very common for people who have this ADHD constellation of traits. Um, and so I suppose a brief description of what that is sudden, intense, um, uncomfortable or distressing feelings in response to rejection. And the rejection can be real or it can just be perceived. And I suppose there's a variety of ways that those intense feelings can show up or be expressed. It could be anger, either externalized or internalized. It can be sadness. It can be shut down. It can be feelings of shame, harsh self criticism. So there's a whole kind of range of things. And I think, yeah, quite often it will show up as this kind of rumination, like rather than letting that thing go, it'll be like on a loop in the
Mm.
mind and creating kind of like a shame loop or a like, oh, I should have done that differently. And that should, it just gets a bit stuck.
Or I never
So
should have.
yeah, may not be that big a deal. So that's a very unofficial description of what rejection sensitivity dysphoria is.
I think
Um,
I'll just add
yeah.
another little dimension there, because a lot of people, when they hear various ADHD trait constellations, as you said, and they go, "Oh, yeah, but I get that sometimes," or
Mm-hmm.
everyone gets that or something. But I think it's the intensity is
Mm,
actually like something. It's major. It's often really crippling actually for people. So it's like on steroids or massively amplified compared to the general population's experience of being, angry or upset or whatever from in
yeah,
response.
embarrassed.
It's like
Yeah.
way bigger. And I think that's
Mm,
also interesting from the point of view of people who have RSD, I don't think they realize that other people don't feel it as strongly as they do. There's like, not everyone actually has this crippling sense of whatever that they're experiencing as well. So it's just this completely out of, and not
Proportion.
an
It's
inability to understand each
disproportionate,
other, but
I would say.
it's very
Disproportionate.
disproportionate, and often people don't on either side of this balance don't recognize the great difference of what the experience is like or not like for people.
Yeah, totally. Because there's no sort of cutoff point where you're like, okay, this is now an out of proportion response. I
Mm,
suppose the test of whether it matters is how much it affects your life. Um,
that's a
in
good
a
point, actually.
mm, in a practical sense.
In a
Yeah,
practical sense, yes. Yeah, because it can
yeah.
be something that just has a minor impact on you, or for a lot of us, it's actually shapes how we live and stops us from doing things, or things of that nature. And I think that's pretty significant. Yeah, that's definitely my experience. Um,
Mm, mm.
Definitely through first half of my life. um, Majorly significant. In fact, I can remember being in my early 30s the first time I was in a staff meeting, just a small staff meeting. There was 4 of us, not many people.
Mm,
I'd been working there for a couple of years, and got on well with my colleagues. There was no issues whatsoever, and it took, it wasn't till that point, 2 years in, and like I said, my mid-30s was the first time I actually voiced a differing opinion. That small. Because that's, prior to that, for my entire life up till then, I would never have done that. Would never actually put myself forward or put my opinion forward where other people could shoot me down. That's just, you just do that. So a
mm,
lot of times, my input did not happen, and things could have been differently in different situations. So this is a long time of my point of view, or my 2 cents worth, or perhaps my insight into a circumstance. So it's not just necessarily sharing my own opinion. It may have been my take on something that could have made things better, or etc. etc. Wasn't happening. So people were
mm,
not able to have that richness or that accuracy or that input, because I was too terrified of being shot down and what would happen, and people disrespecting me. And so for me is a lot of shame. Huge shame is the one for me, how that shows up. Shame.
mm.
Yeah. So it's amazing what a difference to your life. And I'm just actually just reflecting now about when I didn't say things, other people could benefit from it. So it actually impacted other people's lives too.
That's right. It's other people, and then it's your own, obviously your own, like maybe you didn't get what you wanted. Like that's the most obvious example. Um, and that can happen over and over again. And then that kind of lays down pathways of, well, I just don't get what I want. And maybe, almost like I'm invisible. Um, but, I think it's interesting. So this kind of fear of judgment or intense reaction to the perception of someone else's judgment that can happen to anyone based on their life experiences. Like it could obviously be a trauma response. And then
Yes.
I think the link to ADHD is, often it could be because some ADHD people experience more judgment because of the way they are. That's one factor. But
Mm,
I think it probably also comes down to being innately more sensitive, and in terms of your kind of stress response. So that kind of hypothalamic pituitary axis, maybe a hyperreactive amygdala in terms of sensory input, and it creates this kind of snowballing effect of this sensitivity to think, and criticism, I think, is a big one. I look back on my childhood, and I was obviously, very shy to begin with. I was nicknamed the silent one at one point, which is kind of funny and
oh,
a little bit mean. um, because I just wouldn't respond to people. I'd feel so stressed. Um, and and it was very much about keeping myself safe. I was really
Mm.
fearful of what people's reaction to me would be, of getting it wrong, that sense of not belonging. And some obvious examples I can remember from when I was a kid: I would never put my hand up and offer um, an answer in class. I was sort of
God,
like a
no.
mod, and the model student in my reports would come home and be like, Kirsty's, very this, that, that. She does all her work. She's, focuses well. Well, I used to be focus well. But it would always be, it would be good if she interacted more in class or offered, because I just wouldn't. I was
Mm.
terrified. Um, and then, I wanted to always get things right and do my best, because I was so horrified by any criticism. So, mild constructive criticism would feel um, like a bodily attack.
Mm.
And so I can remember one incident, and I remember it very clearly because it was like horrific to me. I think I was 8. I had this teacher. She was fairly strict, but I really liked her. And you know, I was normally getting things right. And it was something I was writing, and I spelled it wrong. And she had an expectation of me to get it right, I think. And so she came up to me and she was like, sort of correcting me. And I was mortified. And I remember it would always feel like a massive amount of kind of rising heat in my body, and like my face was on fire, and the really fast heartbeat.
It's a real
um,
physical response.
like a very strong visceral response of, like fear, basically, like this real panic. And then because I was stressed, I wrote the word again and I got it wrong again. And then she whacked her ruler on the table. And so, like, this is
Out.
such a small thing, but I remember it so clearly because it was like this really traumatic experience.
Mm.
And then things like that, I would, without obviously wanting to, I would replay it in my head over and over and over. And as you said, it was like this shame of like, oh, I just wish I could rewind time and get it right, and then like, that person wouldn't say that thing that completely crushed me. Um, yeah, so that's one example, and then this would
That's
continue. Yeah.
that's interesting. One thing that occurred to me when you were saying that story about your childhood and your reports is that often when people are wondering if someone has ADHD or looking for a diagnosis, and they are looking for the people who got the talks too much and things on their report, couldn't sit still, can't
Mm.
they? Whereas you and I are both examples of the absolute opposite. I would never have been had talk too much on my report because I was too shy, and I think I interacted more than you did, but still wasn't going to do very much. I had social anxiety and things of that nature, and didn't get on with other kids very well, and was so on. So I was very quiet and I was very well behaved, and I was, yes. Sometimes it's those sorts of. I'm thinking about how that spelling mistake probably made you work very hard on not making those spelling mistakes again. So you would have shown up as a model student as opposed to a failing student, because it was the not getting things wrong and the RSD tying, connecting with that just made that such a necessary thing in your life. So as for me, it's the same too. I struggle getting things wrong, which I'll go, that's probably the RSD and all the brain things that you were describing before. I must admit, I was loving hearing you put my difficulty coping in the world into brain science. And for a way, it was like, see, I'm not a complete loser. It's actually and
Well,
it's
not completely. Yeah.
that's right. So yeah, it's awesome because we think that we're complete waste of space, or we can't get things right, or things of that nature. So the self talk is dreadful when you've got
Mm.
RSD. it's actually next level, unfortunately. So but
Yeah,
yeah, I just
yeah,
at the point where a lot of people, when they're looking at the list of ADHD, the bingo card, how we can be missed so easily because it's coming through for us in a completely different way externally, even though whereas ADHD is the rowdy one. So yeah, interesting.
yeah, yeah, that's right. And then it might be framed as anxiety, and that's true to a certain extent, but sometimes it's just helpful to see these sort of expressions from different angles in
Mm,
terms of understanding yourself and managing that. Uh, yeah. And so, obviously there was things like this in my childhood. I was extremely quiet and I would never disagree with anybody. I would just zip it. And, of course, then I would have times where I was like, I really wish I could speak up and say, like, actually, I disagree. And
mm,
especially if it came to something like if I saw, another child being treated badly, and I wouldn't join in on that or anything, but I also wouldn't be the one to be like, hey, maybe we should stop that. I just was like almost like I physically couldn't
yeah, I
do.
would never
Yeah.
have been able to do it either. You're just asking to make yourself the target instead. I was just that would be a horrifying idea. As much as I'd
Mm.
like to be the big brave superhero, it's like that would just be, yeah, a horrifying thought when I was younger. Absolutely. Now I will say something most of the time. There'll still
Mm.
be times when I feel too overwhelmed by whoever or the situation, but I'm more likely to stand up for things now, which is I'm quite happy about, quite proud of myself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a skill that's taken me a long time to develop as well. And now I'm quite happy to disagree in a diplomatic way, but
Mm,
that's taken a long time. That really
mhm,
has. And as well as not feeling able to disagree or stand up for things publicly. It really there was a really the perfectionism was a massive thing.
yes.
So it definitely stopped me from trying things that I knew I
Mhm,
wasn't going to be good at,
mhm,
even if they might be fun, even if they might be really useful. And sticking
yep.
to like, okay, I'm gonna do well in this, and I'm gonna tick boxes. Just spent so much of my life ticking boxes. Like pass the tests, go to uni, get the degree, get another degree, and so on and so forth. And I suppose, like a lot of people, because I was so like, there was always a part of me that was that you knew that it was a bit inauthentic, but it was too
Mm.
scary to change. And so then I got really sick and then I had to change.
Ah,
And
good
often
old
we
body
have these,
forcing the situation. Absolutely. Thank you, universe. Yeah.
that's right. And it happens to a lot of people where it's like
Mm,
something big has to happen to kind of force you to shift. And then it's awful. And then it's ultimately a great thing. But
but you have to go through the experience, unfortunately. Yeah.
yeah.
Actually, when you were just discussing shortly, a moment ago about the perfectionism and not wanting to do things because you or try things because you were pretty sure you were going to suck, and that's um, I have, yeah, you mentioned before I'm a upcycler, I'm a crafter. I do a lot of makey things. I can't draw to save my life, but I create in all sorts of different ways. But the number of things that I create is only a very tiny proportion of the number of things that have been created in my head or ideas I've got. And most of the time, I don't make any steps towards it. They just develop in my head and then go nowhere because of that same fear of it not working, fear of it getting it wrong, or it's, yeah, which is what the first draft is supposed to be.
Yeah.
It could be an experimental expression and then you go again. But I always struggle with it not actually turning out pretty darn good the first time, which is again crippling and stupid. However, that has been my way, and I actually think that a lot of my procrastination, well, it depends on the situation, but a lot of times my procrastination about getting started on a project or particular task is because I have to get past the massive inertia
Mm.
of the RSD, creating this whole fear of it not working out, fear of getting it wrong and things like that. So yeah, that would explain a bunch of my procrastination issues.
Yes, because we kind of know that if you're ADHD, often you'll have trouble getting started, but there's a range of reasons for that. So it could be like, I have trouble chunking stuff down into steps. I have trouble
Mm,
getting motivated, but then there also additionally can be this kind of, yeah, as you say, a hump that's more like fear of failure.
mm,
So I don't even want to start.
mm,
Yeah. Mm. And
definitely
so,
true.
yeah, what would you say are some of the things that have helped you in small or bigger ways to not have this type of thing affect your life so much?
That is a really interesting question because it's built up over time.
Mm.
I think part of it's definitely helped to getting older, and I'm not
Mm.
sure if you have to get older in order to get to a better place, or whether it's just as you get older, it's reasonably common for people to their experience of the world and how they see themselves in the world changes, and they don't care as much about other people's input. um there's great memes about women over 40 and women over 50 no longer giving a crap and stuff like that, and it's like, well, this is exactly true. We
Yeah.
kind of care, we stop caring so much about what other people think, and I think that takes away some of the strength of RSD. But well, for me, what other people thought was a massive component of it. So therefore, when that's no longer as powerful, its effect on me is no longer as powerful. I guess it
Mhm.
took away some of the strength of my RSD. So maybe you just have to age. um,
Yeah.
a bummer. But I also think, oh, I just accumulated over time examples of not dying, not the world not ending, this not actually going as badly as I thought it would be, etc., etc. And little by little by little by little by little, I think I just gradually built up a little bit more of a stiffer backbone in that respect, and so became a bit more it's possible for me to try something. I don't always, but it just became something that might have happened more and more frequently and yeah, I like a snowball effect, and then you discover that actually you still didn't die and actually wasn't that bad, and then you kind of it's easier to try or reach that again, or to try again, or to put yourself in that situation again, as long as if the circumstances are favorable. But yeah, I think you just build up a bit of a, it's not like building up an immunity, but you just build up the muscle
A pathway or a muscle of, yeah,
pathway.
yeah. Mm.
Yeah. So it is definitely something has built up and become easier for me over time. And I definitely will say that it's not gone, but it's not as, it doesn't have as big an impact on my life by a long shot anymore. And also I can see it now.
Mm.
Sometimes when I'm just going, oh, actually, yeah, I can't push through this one. Okay, I'm just gonna have to ride that. That's a situation I'm not, and I just go, right, this is where I'm at right now. And being a female with a hormone cycle across the month, I know that there's times in the month where my hormones support me being a bit more
Out
positive
for,
and
yeah.
outgoing, and therefore I'm a bit more capable of, and also you're thinking sharper at different times in your cycle. And then at other times in my cycle, there's no way I'm putting myself forward. I do not doing that. So yeah, sometimes it's picking your battle, sometimes it's picking
Mm.
knowing yourself and where you're at, and so kind of going, yeah, I've got the ability to push myself a bit today, or I really am not going to. So yeah, I think it's a combination of those sorts of things, I would
Yeah.
suggest. So it's
Mm.
no one single self-help thing that I can say, go and use this app, or
No, of
go
course,
and
and
do
it
that
will be
meditation. It'll be
different for
easy.
everyone, of course. But yeah, I think
Yes.
it is interesting to note that we might have these sort of innate tendencies coupled with whatever our life experiences are. But, if you're experiencing currently, really horrendous rejection sensitivity, that's not some sort of fixed, immutable thing that can't change. Um,
Mm,
you may always have a little bit of a tendency towards it, maybe not, but neuroplasticity is a thing, and I have a fairly similar experience, I would say, and that just gradually over time, I'm much more, I suppose, aligned in myself in terms of, a lot of us as kids didn't have much of a sense of our innate worthiness, like simply because we are, not because our parents or people around us didn't understand that our value, but maybe we didn't, it wasn't communicated to us in a way that we could really take on board. And so a lot of that, a lot of our sense of self-worth was probably really fake because it was just based on external um, acknowledgement, um, and things from outside of our own intrinsic motivations. So it's gradually over time I'm more aware of you know what I want and who I am. And as you say, that kind of leads gradually to caring less and less what other people think. I'm still really interested in what other people think. It's not a sense of I don't care what you think, or I don't acknowledge the the value of what you think. Um, but it just doesn't shake me in the same way that it used to.
mm,
So I suppose that, yeah, that's kind of like a spiritual journey. And then, you know, um, working with kinesiology, obviously I've done lots of sort of energy work and working with the nervous system and the energy centers. And that's all, it has all contributed. And then but I would say it still just requires practice, as you say, building the muscle, like just being in situations where, um, I could be criticized, where I am criticized, where someone disagrees with me, picking situations where I'm like, actually, I am going to communicate that I don't agree. And I know that people will be angry, and I'm just going to do it anyway. And each time it actually just gets a lot easier. So instead of that like full body fight or flight, heat, rapid heartbeat, um, now sometimes I still get a little bit of a if I see someone like
oh, for
someone
sure.
someone someone getting into that combative mode. Um,
Mm,
but it's much more fleeting, and as you're saying, can notice it and just be like, that's there. And it doesn't mean that I have to back down, doesn't mean that I'm wrong. Also doesn't mean that I have to be combative back to this person. It just is there. So
mm.
yeah, that's boring, but just practicing makes a big difference to me.
Yeah, I often all overthink beforehand. I'm a big overthinker, huge
Mm,
overthinker, but I will have, be expecting or deciding that someone's going to have a negative
uh,
response to
mhm.
what I do and say, and then they don't more often than not, It's like, I guess maybe
Mm,
building up over time more and more of these experiences, and I go, actually more often than not they don't. Another thing that I found useful is realizing that other people don't think about me as much as I think they do.
yes. Our egos are so
Yes,
adorable,
they're
aren't
often
they?
a bigger deal in my mind. I'm thinking that they're going to be thinking about what I said or who I am or what I did or whatever a heck of a lot more than they actually do. It's possibly very fleeting and they've got bigger worries on their minds or more interesting things to think about than that incident or this or what I said or did. And it's like the massive drama in my head and it's already
Mm,
gone. from them. So realizing that I don't actually matter in the way that I thought I did. I don't impact people the way that I think I do. Is actually that's been really helpful to have that click in my brain and actually sit there and go, well, actually, they've probably already forgotten it. So that's been things like that. So useful things along the way have been like little aha moments that have just changed things in my head. Those have been really helpful, actually. That's things like that have been great.
Mm. Yeah, it's kind of quite a liberating perspective to think, to rather than looping, to just be like, well, that happened, and probably no one cares except me.
Mhm.
And even if they do, in a sense, that's none of my business. That's their own mental loop. That's
Yeah.
that's their responsibility to take care of. Not in the sense of not being mindful about what you say to people or caring about their feelings. It's like,
But
if it's
own
that, yeah, it's that balance of like, yes, be a caring, loving person in the world, and take as much responsibility as you can for your own um crap, all the thoughts and feelings,
Hmm.
and realize that other people, um I wouldn't say need to do that too, but will be better off if they do that. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Um, but it's a learned skill, um, to kind of meet
I
people
had
where
another
they
thought.
are.
When you were talking just before about how through your life you've done your energy work and bits and pieces and things like that, and how your nervous system is in a completely different place than it was when you were much younger. And
Mm,
I'm wondering whether how much contribution that kind of thing is from the point of view. I'm thinking that my lifestyle is pretty sort of cruisy for the most part. I mean, I have my stresses and my issues and things to contend with, but um I live quite an ADHD friendly lifestyle because I'm at
mm.
home and I have a daughter who I strongly suspect is as ADHD as me. And I have before I even knew about any of this, I parented her from a very tried to meet her needs and tried to see what she needed and parent her that way, as opposed to do the traditional, this is how you should parent any child.
Yeah,
So I've built a life around her that's actually, now you look back at it, full of accommodations for someone with ADHD.
yeah.
And therefore my life also was as well. And it's actually an interesting thought that I've had. So I'm going to tangent, as we do,
Mhm.
slightly, to say that my daughter, because she's homeschooled, because she's lived with an ADHD parent who has built accommodations around her, etc., she doesn't necessarily present very ADHD to people, because she's not living in a world and been going through a schooling system that is not ideal for neurodiverse brains. So she lives in a much less stressed environment, and so hopefully I mean, she still has massive emotions and things. She's got
Mm,
that aspect of ADHD in spades.
mhm.
But I think she doesn't appear to be very ADHD dominant, because the way that it comes out for people that are struggling in an ADHD non-friendly world, she doesn't have those so much. And so I'm just thinking, and so bringing that back to my starting point, that train's looping. Let's
Looping
get back.
around, looping
The
back.
train rumbling through this conversation, as my friend would say.
Well, the kind of effective environment and the way
Yes, but I'm
lifestyle.
wondering
Mm,
how much, when people are impacted by RSD a lot, how much the environmental impact on their basic nervous system, stress levels, etc. Like that. So if their baseline stress levels are already pretty jittery,
mm,
and that's because of their their environment, their school, their work, their how their the lifestyle they're forced to live, that is not friendly to how their brain works and nervous system works and sensitivities and everything like that, then you're already starting like this. And then RSD is just like a very small gap to reach. Whereas if you are in a situation where maybe if things like meditation or breath work or
Hmm.
energy healing or whatever variety of thing that you have come across that helps to soothe your nervous system so you're actually more like this,
Mm.
then I think I'm wondering whether that makes RSD a little bit less of an impactful thing. What do you think? Did that
Yeah.
make any sense?
Yes, totally. It makes anything less of a trigger. So yeah, if you're looking at someone who has a maybe a high baseline level of arousal, a sensitive nervous system, whatever causes that, whether it's sort of an intrinsic factor or not, and then you combine that with um, a low stress environment versus a higher stress environment, like obviously the outcome is going to be quite different.
Mm.
And the way that they are kind of nurtured and the way they receive that nurturing, because we're the same, we live quite a sort of free flowing, low demand type of lifestyle. That's what works for us. I can't imagine having my kids on a tight schedule. And it's taken us years to be able to do kind of regular activities, and we're much busier now than we used to be. But my boys are 8 and 10 now, and I actually my boys do have diagnoses. My older boy has an ADHD diagnosis, and it was interesting. I took him when he was 6, I think. Yeah, and they give you um, standard is to have a form for the parents to fill out and a form for the school to fill out. And then, which is an interesting scenario if your child's not in school, because often kids
Mhm.
act very differently at home and at school. And the psychiatrist did actually say to me, he said, it is trickier to diagnose based on the fact that you are parenting in a way that really suits him. So, basically in a nutshell, he's got less symptoms of distress, even though the underlying sensitivities or traits are there because of the way you're running your life. And I suppose that's kind of a good goal for our children, and then also for ourselves, so we can, as we reparent our children, and if we don't have children, we can still reparent ourselves, basically, in a way that we're feeling nurtured and valued, and just living a life in a way that works for us, you
That's
know?
a really interesting expression, reparenting yourself. How would you what does that look like, do you think? I never quite understand that one.
As in a practical terms. So say, for example, something upsets you. First, you have to have enough spaciousness to notice. So that's the first step, is, being able to create the pause. But if you can't stop in the moment, you can still look at it later, and basically have compassion for yourself, whatever that
Mhm.
looks like. And,
Mm.
so just noticing what happened, why it was upsetting, why it felt like that, without judgment and without a big storyline.
Mm. You're not making yourself wrong.
Not making yourself
You're not
wrong.
making
And
the other people wrong either. It's just what was.
no, yeah, that because it can be a very instant desire to blame when something goes awry, based on, those feelings of inner insecurity. And so it could be blaming someone else, but often it's also self blame, um, and all those kind of layers of, well, there must be something a bit wrong with me. I'm not good enough. Why can't I cope with this? Why didn't I manage that? Why am I making this such a big deal?
People
um,
seem to be just fine.
yeah, and so
Other
if
people
you, yeah,
than
that's
I
right.
can.
Why can they do it and I can't? And if you have a child, it's easier sometimes to initially sort of anchor yourself to, okay, I'm having this experience. If I was talking to my child having this experience, how would I speak to them? And how different is that to how I speak to myself
Mm.
internally? Mm, yeah. And it can be nice also to do kind of more obvious visualizations where you actually go. imagine yourself as a small child and imagine going to yourself as that child and asking them, what do you need? What do you need to feel safe and to feel loved and to feel like it's safe to express yourself, to have an opinion and to feel
That feels
things.
very vulnerable, actually. It's interesting. I'm imagining myself doing that type of mental activity, and I'm kind of going, I don't.
That's
That's
resistance. Yeah.
vulnerable with myself, and so it's just me, and it still
It's a,
seems too vulnerable, which is
yeah.
a very interesting response. I have to think on that a bit tomorrow.
Yeah, it is. It is very vulnerable and obviously, yeah, that's something anyone can explore when they feel inclined as a meditation or as a journaling, um, or with whatever kind of physical things work for you, whether it's tapping or, like, you know, touch or massaging somewhere that connects with the vagus nerve, like around the ears. So there's lots of different ways of doing that in an intentional way. And even, just these are really basic points, but if there's something stressful, these are, if you just touch on your forehead like this is it brings blood back into the forebrain and it brings blood back into your stomach. So kind of softening that fight or flight response that we can so often go into. So that's a
It's
nice
amazing
one
how
to do.
you get something in contact with your forehead feels. It's like there's something about your forehead area, isn't it? I know it's like
Yeah.
if you're not feeling well and someone puts their hand on your forehead,
And it's like,
take your temperature, but half the time it's a soothing mechanism, whether they are aware of it or not. And that's as much the value as taking the temperature. It's just that connection and soothing feeling of your forehead being touched. Yeah,
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, definitely. And, often with ADHD, there's, the prefrontal cortex is involved in terms of um, being able to focus and stay motivated and all those types of things. So it's kind of like, just come back. And it is very intuitive, even, if I'm really stressed, I might be like, oh, like face palm kind of. So you kind of do it automatically. And it's not just an expression of despair. It's probably actually helping you at the same time to
Really good
recalibrate.
point. Mm.
Mm,
I kind of want
mm.
to do that again. That feels really,
It
really
feels
good.
really good. It feels really good. You
I
can
want
do the
to do that
fingers,
again.
or you can use the whole hand.
Yeah,
And
that
then
feels really good.
if you come to, like the bulge on the back of your head, so the occiput. So the front is good for present stresses, and then the back is it's to do with your visual input, but it's also quite good for past stresses. So
Okay.
if you're thinking about something that stressed you as a child and you want to kind of go back and rewire it a bit, or even just if you're perseverating. So if something happened that stressed you and you've got into a loop of replaying it, like a shame loop or you know, just something as simple as this can help to kind of break it up a little bit.
Mm,
Mm.
that's fascinating. I must try that. That's really cool.
Yeah, and it's easy. And my kids don't really like me doing it to them if they're already really stressed. It's that like, get off me because I'm already. But it's great
Half that feels like,
either when stuff's just ramping up a little bit or after when you're kind of winding back down. Yeah. Or, if you've got a younger child, even, while you're holding them, breastfeeding them, or they're already asleep, you can just do some little stress release for them.
hmm,
Mm. Yeah.
she's 11. I wouldn't get away with it now.
No, yeah, that's like, yeah.
Maybe I can
Is
teach her to do it. Yes.
that's right. And she probably And with all of these things, the hardest thing is remembering to use them in the moment that they would be most useful.
Exactly.
It's really hard.
Executive dysfunction.
It's like, oh, I've got all these tools I could use, but what I really want to do is just kind of stamp my feet. Or yeah,
Yeah.
stand in the
God, great
shower
job.
and think about that really good comeback I could have had in that discussion at the time. I couldn't think of anything. Yeah, so it takes practice, hey, and it's that balance of like, okay, I can work on these stress patterns. I mean, I can also just, when I do freak out, just be like, it's okay. It happens. I'm a human, and there's going to be
Goes
so many more opportunities to try again, especially if you have kids. Any type of kids, but especially high intensity kids. You've got, neurodivergent kids, and you're wondering when you'll next get to practice responding instead of reacting. Well, probably in about 2 minutes,
hmm,
and then again in 5 minutes, and
5
so
in
on,
my house, yes.
and so on. Yeah, so many opportunities. Yeah,
Exactly. Never a dull moment.
yeah. Hmm. Yeah, so interesting. What else do we want to talk about? Or should we try and wrap up? We should probably try and wrap up because if
So we
we,
wrap up.
yeah, we
Finish it
should
nice.
almost. It's 9 o'clock.
I have a child to put to bed, so I'll be practicing these.
Yeah. Excellent. Yes. Greatest teachers over and over and over.
Oh, for sure. Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation tonight. Thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been
Yeah.
really interesting, and I've learned stuff and got to talk and all the good things.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting, and especially as we didn't have much of a plan, but we don't really need one because, yeah.
I'm neurodivergent. I'm good at flying by the seat of my pants. I've been doing it my whole life.
That's right. And there's always stuff to talk about. And if you are so inclined, I'm sure we can come up with something else to talk about another
That
time.
sounds plan. We'll do that.
Maybe how to start and finish projects. Oh.
Follow the
Be-
dopamine.
because I see, yeah, I've been quite inspired watching you do, is it called Sashiko? Sashiko?
Oh yes, Sashiko.
Your
So that's
your daily crafting challenge.
yes, 100-day
Yeah,
project is part of
yes.
that. So and yeah, part actually just very, very quickly. So yes, that 100-day project, they encourage you as part of it to post on social media every day, and so therefore I have to
Accountability.
accountable. I know, and it's like a greater public, and I know that a lot of you or people that are my Facebook friends, um, are liking and commenting and things, so I know people see it. So if I don't do it, then I will know. And I guess also there's a little bit of the I don't want to miss a day because then it'll just ruin the whole flow of having the right day on the right number and things like that. So a little bit
Yes, that's right.
neurotic there.
And the further you come with it, the more disappointing it will be if you're like, darn, I got this far. And then
I actually had just gone to the loo and was about to go to bed, as in basically walk down the hall, climb into my bed, go to sleep, when I went, oh, I forgot to do today. And I hadn't done any sewing, let alone posting. So I actually stayed up for another hour because I have to do something on the day and then photograph and post it. And then I can go to sleep. And I guess I'm getting a really good dose of dopamine from just achieving that each day and knowing that I'm on target and I'm keeping to those things. So for someone who hates structure, I'm
Mhm.
actually sometimes structure works. And this is
Yes.
one this particular
Yeah,
one is good. I'm thinking I
totally.
need to somehow I want to practice, improve my ukulele playing. And it was something I was like, oh, I'll practice, do a bit every day. And I haven't. since January. So I'm kind of going, once this 100-day project's ended, I might not be posting on Facebook every day because I think it would drive everybody mad, but I think I might try and do a ukulele practice 100-day challenge and see if I can actually keep this same momentum that I've got with this crafting one, and see if I can actually, because I reckon if I can do a little bit for 100 days, I've got to get better.
That's
Surely.
right.
So,
You're building that muscle. And so let's have a whole nother conversation another time about motivation, dopamine. And then it's like, I feel like it's the sweet spot. There's a sweet spot achieving the balance of flow and structure.
yes.
Yes. So you
Following
can
the squirrel and
yeah,
not following the squirrel.
yeah, there's like, you need some novelty, but you also need some kind of a structure to keep things going. Otherwise, it'll be like, I started this and I started this and I started this. And yeah, that's all. That's all.
That can be.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, there's a cat. Yeah. So we'll finish up there. Thank you, everyone. If you're tuning in cyberspace, you're very welcome here. And you're welcome to comment on the YouTube videos. And if you are someone who's interested in topics of neurodiversity, feel free to get in touch and join the conversation. Okay. Bye for now.